There is something called micro innovation. So it's not like you completely change direction, but if you do one small thing, it's like changing a recipe. If you change one ingredient in a recipe, you're going to get a different end result. So in companies, take small risks and make those changes come from your staff, because your staff and your clients and your customers are your best critics, because they know the internal workings, they know the stoppages. Your customers know what they don't like.
Greetings everyone, and welcome to Unleashed, the fastest hour on the internet, where every episode I'm joined by a best-selling author or accomplished leader who shares common sense leadership ideas, all in the name of helping you make a greater impact. I'm your host, Jeff Tetz. Most leaders feel their business could perform better. At Results, we help leadership teams achieve their bold visions by providing a unique system of accountability and ongoing coaching to create more predictable and successful outcomes. Reach out for a conversation at unleashresults.com. How do you stay relevant in a constantly changing world? That's part of the focus of today's conversation with Canadian media icon, Erica Ehm. Erica Ehm is an entrepreneur, media personality, and force for positive change. Originally a MuchMusic television host, Erica has harnessed her years in the spotlight to become a powerful keynote speaker focused on leadership and innovation. Known for conducting extraordinary interviews, Erica is an in-demand event host and facilitator. She's co-founder of M2 Speaking, which offers presentation skills and training. Erica is also considered a pioneer in content marketing, social media, and community building. Under her leadership in over 17 years as founder of the digital agency M & Co. and the YMCA.ca platform, her companies have earned over a dozen prestigious marketing and leadership awards, including the Governor General's Innovation nomination. Since her company's acquisition, she remains on the leadership team as Chief Innovation Officer. Erica is a storyteller at heart. Her multimedia portfolio includes author, journalist, playwright, award-winning songwriter, and podcaster. Her remarkable ability to reinvent, influence, create, and lead with relentless positivity is what lights Erica up. Erica, welcome to Unleashed.
Thank you, Jeff.
It is a thrill to have you here. And if you would have told me, when I was 13 years old watching MuchMusic that I would be having a chance to interview you, I would have thought you were crazy. So it is absolutely an honor to be chatting with you today. And I can't thank you enough for making some time for me.
Well, it's exciting to watch people who grew up watching MuchMusic, hopefully having absorbed some of what we did back in the day and then turning it into your own media and business empire.
Yeah, and it's. I think the thing that I have been most fascinated in is actually watching your career unfold afterwards. So there's a lot of things. You have such depth of your experiences and your knowledge, and I'm going to do my best just to give our listeners a little bit of as much of that as I can and tease some of that out. But I know for one thing's for certain, we won't have enough time to cover it all, but we'll do our very best. Now, I do want to go back to MuchMusic as we dig into this conversation, Erica. And I'm always so interested in how significant opportunities present themselves and some of the origin aspects of it. And unless I'm mixing up my facts, I was just flabbergasted to learn that this opportunity came up for you while you were a receptionist at City TV, and you just decided to apply. And first of all, is that true? And then I was just so curious to know, what was it about you that said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to apply for that position.
Well, it's not untrue, but it's a very simplified version of reality. Because as you know, the media likes to just, make everything seem like a fairy tale, which it really wasn't. To some degree, I had worked in the music business since I was 16 or 17 years old. I started working at the local radio station in Montreal, Chaume FM, the big rock radio station, when I was 17. I didn't get paid, but I was there every day and I started to learn the industry. I was DJing in punk clubs and new wave clubs in Montreal. I was managing artists. I was working in record stores. I was obsessed with the music business. Then I went to university. And in my third year at university, I reached out to Moses Neimer because I discovered a show called The New Music. Now, this is in probably 1979, and it was maybe 1980, and it was the only show almost in the world that celebrated alternative music and told the stories and interviewed the artists who were making music that was innovative. And I was obsessed because that's what I was into. So all I wanted to do was be a part of that show. When I met with Moses, he had come to Ottawa for a CRTC hearing, and I asked him for a job. And he asked me what I wanted to do. I had no idea. I mean, I was in a communications program at university, but it wasn't a college. It was a university where they forced me to read books like 5 Arguments for the Elimination of Television, which I stupidly mentioned to Moses, and he gave me sort of that stare like, why the fuck would you tell me that since I am innovating television? I was like, but I was young. I was at that time maybe 19 years old. So maybe I was 20. In any case, I asked him for a job, and he gave me a job answering the phones at the New Music. So I was in there, and I was able to absorb and learn. He gave me an opportunity really to make my own way once I was in there. And my roles grew because I'm a capable human being, and I became the entertainment coordinator. So I was the intermediary between all the reporters, the on-air people, and the PR people, or the artists, whoever wanted to have an interview. This was before there was MuchMusic. And yes, when MuchMusic actually became an ongoing concern, I was already working part-time at the local cable company doing on-air stuff because I'd already decided that I had to be somewhere to tell the stories. I just wanted to interview people, really. I made a demo tape and it was really crappy. And so I made a second demo tape that the Much crew helped me because I was, part of the gang. And they gave me the job.
Yeah. So what do you think they saw in you back then? Because this was a very new position. Like, there were not a lot of VJs around the world. I mean, obviously MTV was sort of at the forefront of creating that as a position. So there wasn't a lot of historical data to look back on. But what do you think they saw in you that they said, okay, we think Erica could be really good at this?
Well, if you look at my age at the time, I was 22. My resume was so rich at that point already because I'm really self-motivated and like laser focused. So I already had so many skills and so many connections in the music business already. And my enthusiasm was off the charts, probably a little annoyingly so, but they knew that I had the passion and they knew that I worked hard because they had worked with me for 3 years. So I guess I was low-hanging fruit, and there was nothing against me. It wasn't like I was bad at anything. However, they did do something that was very, let's call it innovative or challenging. They put me, who had really zero broadcasting experience, in front of a camera for 4 hours a day on live television with no script. So that is a situation that it could have gone really badly. And in many cases, it did go badly at the beginning because I was essentially learning how to be a broadcaster and growing up at the same time in live time, in real time. So it was hard. And it was hard on me. I know that my bosses had planted several times. They were like, what have we done? But they gave me time to learn, which I think we don't do these days. Either you're in and you're good at it, or they take you off the air right away. They persevered and they believed that I would work hard. They supported me to some degree, not much, but they supported me a bit. And I eventually got better. And I think there was an emotional connection that grew between the audience and me because they watched someone with very few skills become a broadcast professional in front of their eyes.
Yeah, well, and you've been quoted as saying interviewing, there's an art to it, right? And the thing that most interests me about this quote on your website is that there's an art to it. You've learned that obviously through your extensive experience. But what caught my attention was that it's a skill that you're continually trying to get better at. And I love that you're trying to master it because you've been doing it for so long. You're great at it. You're world class at it. But what I was curious about is, especially in those early days, Erica, what was your continuous improvement process when you were learning how to be on camera without a script for 4 hours?
I think there is a skill to phrasing a question to elicit the most interesting response. So how you phrase the question. Also finding topics that the artist may not be tired of talking about already. So trying to find those little pockets that they go, oh, I actually am interested in talking about that, especially when you're interviewing bands who have been on the road for a while and are really talked out. I think you're doing a good job, by the way. You were asking me how, I think you're doing that is you're looking at who I am and you're reading about me. So you're coming to the table informed, but you're asking a question that's kind of different than most people would ask me. And I think that really speaks to your ability to steal my ideas. Way to go, Jeff.
Well, this is my approach. I mean, I am a novice at this, but I love public speaking, and I'm just fascinated about motivated, driven, successful people and what makes them tick. Mm-hmm. I tend to rely on trying to figure out things that I'm really curious about. And I don't know if anybody else that listens will be curious about it, but I think that there's a magic to making it for myself that makes it better for others.
I do agree with that, but I'm also going to add another layer on it, because you also have to be sensitive that you are really the intermediary between me and the end user. So yes, absolutely ask questions that you're curious about, but also keep in mind that there are people who think differently than you, might want to hear things that are slightly different. So for me, I always felt this was actually not just about me. It's about all the girls who were at home screaming that they couldn't interview Duran Duran. I had to ask the questions that they wanted to know the answers to. Yeah,
and great segue, because how did you have confidence that you knew what those questions were then, that were going to make you a better conduit?
I didn't. I just took a deep breath and dove in. It's kind of my life, Jeff. I'm always insecure, but I just have to do it. The opportunity far outweighs the fear that I feel. And especially when I was doing things at Much, my God, it was live TV. You have no choice. I will tell you that my first year at Much, Live Aid happened. I think it was like 5 months into me doing the job. I was so afraid that I hid in a closet before I went on air. And I remember my boss yelling, "Where the hell is Erica?" And I kind of snuck out of the closet at a certain point, but I was completely freaked out. So it was not really confidence. It was just out of necessity. You just have to do it.
Yeah, well, and you said the opportunity pulled you out of the fear. So the opportunity was greater than the fear, and I resonate with that. But what was the opportunity for you? Like, what were you trying to accomplish that made that achievement bigger than any fear that you were hiding in the closet, for example?
Jeff, I got to interview Duran Duran. I was the one to ask them the questions. Now, let me make a little clarification here. I had zero interest, and still don't, in fame. Zero interest. It's not that I wanted to be the person who was known as the person who interviewed Duran Duran. Instead, this is why I like to do interviews. I want to understand where is the magic that allows you to be who you are? Which is, I think, what you're trying to do with me is, who are you that gives you the confidence to interview someone? You're asking because you do those interviews. For me, I just wanted to be the one asking the questions because I had so many questions.
Yeah, I identify with that a lot. Yep, I really do. And like much different scale. I'm not interviewing Duran Duran, but I've got like 1 degree of separation now, right, to Simon Le Bon. I never thought about it that way.
That's right. He was a really, really nice guy, I have to say. He was such a professional. I interviewed him 2 or 3 times. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember that they were very wacky and naughty, if you will. So they were, shooting me with a water gun and, just being entertaining. But at the same time, Simon Le Bon kept his eyes on mine. It's almost like he was sending me a message like, are you okay? Are we pushing it too far? Are you okay? And I looked at him a few times and just nodded with a big smile. And so they kept on going. So he was a consummate professional because he understood he was putting on a show, but not at my expense. And I just have so much respect and gratitude for him.
Yeah. And very different than the Red Hot Chili Pepper interview that you had been talking about over the last few months. And we're spending a bit more time on Much than I thought we might, Erica, but I think it's a natural, like a question I thought I might ask if we had time. But if you could go back, is there any do different? Like, do you think that way? If you could go back in time and say, geez, I would like another crack at that, or I wish I would have done that differently, or knowing what I know now, here's a different thing or a different approach I would have taken to some situation. Like, do you have any of those moments? And I wonder if you might share some if you do.
I think what's fascinating is our perspective, not just mine, but the Western perspective has really changed in how women are treated in the media. And I did a little experiment a few months ago when someone had posted an interview that was backstage with me and I believe it's either Donnie Wahlberg or Mark Wahlberg, one of the Wahlberg brothers. And it was live. This clip was from a moment that I was live backstage, and he was drunk, and I was interviewing him, and he put his arm around me and he goes, "This is my girlfriend." And I kind of move away from him and I go, "Don't you have to go on stage now?" I was so uncomfortable. And, he's laughing, but there was this entitlement that he had that he can just put his arm around me and tell people that I was his girlfriend, which gives a woman in media the reputation that she sleeps with all the bands, which is the furthest thing from the truth. And nobody stopped him. And nobody said, that's really inappropriate, because that was then and this is now. So I posted that little clip on my Instagram, and it was interesting. I sort of prefaced it with, look at this with new eyes. And the reaction was actually fascinating, where people went, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The first few comments were, "Oh my God, you're so lucky." And then someone shifted their perspective and they saw it with fresh eyes. So to answer your question, I wish that I understood that what they were doing was actually very inappropriate, and their sort of paternalistic entitlement was not okay. I also wish that my bosses had given me permission to say, when a band would do something like that, to give me permission to stop it right in that moment. But they just kept on saying, keep on going, because it made great TV. My discomfort was entertaining. And that really traumatized me, I think, to some degree. It gave me a really strong backbone, but really don't fuck with me ever, because I've been through the fire and I won't let it happen again.
Yeah. I love that concept of looking at it through fresh eyes. And you said something else that is interesting to me, that society, of course, goes through shifts, and perhaps what was tolerated, if not acceptable back then, would not be today. What's the right way, do you think, to hold ourselves and each other accountable for our past?
Just learn from it. You can't change the past. You can't change it. So that was a great learning experience for me to look back now and to show my daughter, look what happened then. Don't accept that. If something like that happens to you, here's what we can do differently. Luckily, I have a really amazing daughter who is being raised by a feminist who believes that men and women should be treated equally and treat each other equally.
Yeah. I want to talk about leaving MuchMusic now, and that's actually the piece that I'm most curious about, and then what you've been doing since. And I was a huge Kobe Bryant fan when he played basketball, but when he transitioned out of basketball and how he seemed to be living his best life after he was kind of out of the spotlight, that was really something I was keen to watch, and obviously had a tragic end there. But I think of you, Erica, a little bit like a professional athlete, where you're in the spotlight at such a young age, and then when that ends, you have your whole life ahead of you. And I wondered, what was that transition period like for you?
Well, it's interesting because that concept of reinvention intrigues me so much that I started my podcast, Reinvention of the VJ, which is essentially that. Is I talked to everybody who was on MuchMusic, who eventually left, and find out how they felt in the moment. Of course, like you, I talk about their early days. We talk about MuchMusic. We share anecdotes. And then we talk about this, which is, why did you leave? How did you feel? How did MuchMusic stop you from success or help you in your success? For me, it was very helpful right at the beginning when I left. I immediately had my own talk show called Real Life with Erica Ehm. It was a 2-year initiative that I did. It was a 1-hour live talk show with 4 segments. I did something like 290 shows a year. It was really a lot of learning. It didn't have anything to do with music. It was really about all the different facets of life. I loved doing it. And then after that, I did a show on Discovery Health. I basically was talent for hire. In the meantime, I was songwriting and doing some of my other entrepreneurial initiatives. But it was interesting, when I got married, I was 37 or 38. I had my first son, and I was persona non grata. Why? I was old and I was fat, and no one would touch me. And I was just beside myself because I was hired all the time for different things. And so I decided to go on my own path. And I was thinking, what is it that lights me up right now? And it was my kids. So I started to look for work related to my kids. So I found a job at a magazine called What's Up Kids. And I offered to write. I just answered an ad, and they're like Erica Ehm? I was like, yep. And so they hired me as a reporter, as a writer, and then I became their editor. And at the same time, I conceived of a show called Yummy Mummy, which I pitched to Life Network and Discovery Health, which was an international show, and they bought the show. So again, that ran for 2 years, and it was my take on modern motherhood. Again, sort of following the real life format, where it was a series of interviews, but it was shot against a green screen in this almost Pee Wee Herman world. I wrote the show, I hosted it, I helped co-produce it, and it was a fantastic experience. And what I loved about it is that it immersed me into the world of motherhood, which I wanted to talk about and learn about. And from there, when the show was over, I had this opportunity to build a community of moms. And so I started a tiny little website. I called it Yummy Mummy Club, and I grew it to one of the largest online properties for women by moms for moms in Canada.
Now, Erica, I think this is such a relevant conversation and a timely one. This thought of reinvention and transitioning, especially in the media industry. Of course, I mean the announcement that Bell had yesterday. Now, how far in advance did you start planning for your exit from Much?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I started planning in 1989 when I asked for a raise from my boss because I was paid the least of all the on-air people, mostly men, and they told me that I was difficult to work with. So I told them to fuck off and I quit. And I went over to my friend Tim Thorney's house and we started to write a song together. I didn't answer the phone for 4 days. I eventually answered the phone and they said, "Erica, come back to work." And I said, "Yeah, if you give me a raise." And so they said, "We'll give you the raise, don't worry." So I got the raise and I had started to work with Tim, and we realized that I actually know how to write songs. He is a fantastic musician and songwriter, but we kind of had this weird chemistry. So ironically, me quitting in 1989 opened up this little window of opportunity for me to connect with Tim. And we ended up being quite prolific in our songwriting team. We started a record label. Some of our artists won Juno Awards. We won songwriting awards. And so it sort of set me on a path to entrepreneurship and giving me a bit of comfort knowing that there were things other than Much out there. Also, when I worked at Much, I had a voiceover career and I hosted events. I started in theater in Winnipeg at the Manitoba Theatre Center. So I had this entrepreneurial streak in me. And also when I realized that they told me on several occasions that I was replaceable, that was the way that management kept us in line, you start to prepare yourself for what would be the inevitable. Now, in this case, I chose to leave, but that's because I was done. I felt too old for it, and they would have ditched me eventually. You know, I knew that. So I also had a book deal when I left. So I had a bunch of projects that were floating around. But to be honest, it was very hard to replicate the consistent income I had working for a company for 13 years. That was fantastic. Not that we got paid so much, but as an entrepreneur, in retrospect, the consistency of being paid every 2 weeks is hard to replicate.
Yeah. Well, and so it occurs to me, at least one of the things that you did of many is you're constantly exploring. You're very entrepreneurial, as you've said, but I just think of just exploration and experimentation and where that leads you. You have all these other avenues available to you that wouldn't have been if you were just laser. Even though you're a laser focused person, you're not laser focused on your career initiatives, which I find interesting. And it's nice if you can get ahead of it. But I'm wondering, in all that you've learned about your own reinvention, and then even some of the patterns that you're picking up on the Reinvention of the VJ podcast, somebody's sitting here today reeling because they lost their job and maybe they didn't see it coming. What are some keys that you have learned about reinvention? Like, even if they're just really tactical, because I'm really interested in trying to help people navigate that tough time if we can use your experience to do that.
Well, it's hard. Right now, it's harder. Because if you're working in the world of media, that industry is in such huge decline. I was kind of lucky in that when I left and when I started YMC, it was really at the rebirth of media, online media. And so I was able to find this little niche and exploit it, if you will. I jumped on Twitter. I used Facebook. I used a lot of the social tools, which today are kind of different. They're already tired, and the trust factor is not there the same way, and it's noisy, and a lot of people who maybe shouldn't be on there are using up the great energy that used to be there. One of the things, though, that I would recommend, there's two things. Number one, understand that you got to make a living, so get a job. Just get a job. Get a job. You have to. And at the same time, think about, what is it that lights you up? What do you love to do? And who do you love to do it with? And who do you want to do it for? And start putting yourself in front of those people, or doing those things in an unpaid capacity. Don't work for people, but start doing those things and building up your resume in that space, which, there is a lot of talk about, interns should be paid for what they do. I didn't. When I first was an intern, I did it. I had other jobs. I worked at Ginsberg and Wong in order to pay for my time working at the cable company. But it gives you hands-on experience, and you start to make connections, and you could insert yourself into a company and build your way up. So I don't want to be sort of inappropriate by suggesting that interns' value are not worth it. But in a really hard economy, if you have the time and the opportunity to work for a company that you believe in some capacity where you get your foot in the door, I say grab it.
Yeah, good advice. Well, and I really like the two steps that you provided too. Like if you're sitting there, a forced reinvention, if you will, just get a job, just find an opportunity. There's a lot of dignity and self-worth just attached to that to buy you some time, never mind the financial piece. But on the second part of the advice of finding out like what lights you up and who you want to do it with and who you want to do it for, is that something that you're really intentional about, or does that just sort of come intuitively to you?
It's both. It's both. It for sure is intuitive, but I have had to really make it intentional because I'm constantly reinventing. Like, for example, I ran YMC for 17 years. In the process, I built M&Co, which is a digital marketing agency. And so I invented digital marketing to moms in Canada, along with a few other really like-minded, self-directed women who had sort of parallel online properties as me. And we invented the concept of influencer. I was doing that in 2008, 2009, before there was something as influencers. So I realized that I have accumulated a lot of skills just by virtue of, I guess, what does it say? Innovation is the mother of reinvention, or necessity is the mother of invention. So I've had to, because I was the main breadwinner in my home. I had to put food on the table. I had to come up with ways to monetize my passion, which was motherhood. And so that is what I say to people is like, you need to monetize what you love to do. But it was slow. It took me a long time to monetize motherhood, to turn YMC into a lucrative proposition, which, by the way, even though my company earned $1.5 million, I didn't. That went to the teams of people who worked for me, all my suppliers, not me. So entrepreneurship is a tough road. So if people are listening who have lost their jobs and they want to start their own, all the power to you, but understand it will take a long time, probably 4 to 5 years, until you actually start making real money. So in the meantime, you need to have your job. You need to earn income and build your own.
Yeah, well, and I often think that one of the biggest determining factors that separates success from everybody else is what you're unwilling to do, not what you're willing to do. And
I love that. I agree with that.
So many people are unwilling to say, well, that's beneath me now. I'm not going to take that job. My experience or my age. And it just prevents people from just getting back on the wheel and just getting a little bit of experience, a little bit of confidence, being productive, feeling good about themselves, meeting new people, right? Those kinds of things. So I think, Erica, your advice is wonderful. And you said the sort of the transition period meant going from that stable income, of course, to then it's like, whoa, trying to find steady revenue streams, a little bit tricky. What did you learn about yourself in that period that surprised you?
I have this unique, maybe not unique, but unique in my mind, ability to put on what I picture as a football helmet with, that reflective black makeup or whatever you guys call it. I see it as war paint, and put on those big shoulder pads, fucking barrel through every obstacle that comes up in my day every day. Fierce problem solver, fearless, and able to withstand the constant rejection that comes with being an entrepreneur. My job is to reach out to people and say, how about this? And they have the opportunity and the power to say yes or no. And I would say that my batting average is probably really low. I would say I get way more no's than yes. But those few yeses that I get, I take them and I blow them up into something spectacular. And I'll tell you an interesting story. When I first started YMC, this is an actual tangible example of it. When I first started YMC, it was an online platform that I built that was written by moms for moms. All these brands were coming to me like buzzards saying, hey, we have a mop or a broom that your moms would love. Can you talk about that with your moms? And I started to say, what's your budget? And they were like, what? We just do organic PR. We don't pay you. Like, yeah, well, I've put an awful lot of time and effort into building this really credible, remarkable community of moms. So what I started to do is like, I need to come up with my offerings. And so I came up with a pitch deck, and it was, for me, the beginning of branded content, integrated content, where I was the intermediary. I would find moms who have an amazing story and brands who have an interesting product and get the moms to write the story from their perspective rather than the brands telling their trite stories about Jane, the soccer mom, who likes the orange juice in the morning before she drives her kids to school in her minivan. That's not really a reflection of motherhood. So I built this concept of branded content, and I started calling people, cold calling. And I freaking use my name. Hi, this is Erica M. Erica M, like from MuchMusic, even though this was like 8 years later. And I said, why, yes, it is Erica M from MuchMusic. And I told them they'd say, what are you up to? And I told them about YMC and my vision for it and how they could benefit from it. They said, wow, that's fantastic. But no, that happened literally for months. No one could see what I saw. Until one day, I will never forget the call. I talk about it in all my interviews. Samantha Kemp Jackson, who worked for Apex PR, said, you know what? That might work for my client, Fuji Films. Have you heard of Fuji? I said, of course I have, trying to play it cool, freaking out on the other end of the call. She said, we'll take the whole thing. We'll take your whole program. So I was able to build a program and thus a working prototype for other potential advertisers to see. And of course, we did a RAP report and showed them these great metrics, was able to use that RAP report to show other non-believers that this new form of media and advertising really was effective. And slowly, I started to get more yeses than nos. And I think it took probably 7 years to get to 1.5 million. slow and steady, understanding what it was we did, never selling out, never caving to the client's desire to make it selly. We were like, nope, that is not what we stand for. We're authentic. We need the story to be true. And we were successful because of that.
I've had Annie Duke on the program a couple of times. And so Annie Duke was the first female World Series poker champion, but she's actually a decision-making strategist. She works out of Wharton in Philadelphia, works with a lot of entrepreneurs. But her latest book, so while she does a lot of things on decision-making, she wrote a book about quitting and how quitting is not so bad. And oftentimes in her research with entrepreneurs, we tend to quit a little bit on the later side than the earlier side. And I wonder, in all the things that you have tried, like I'm imagining you with that football gear, just barreling through obstacles, how do you know, or what's your gauge of when maybe you're headed towards a dead end versus I got to persevere because I still believe in what I'm doing?
I can only talk about what actually happened to me. So in my case, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And one of my kids started to display serious mental health challenges. And I was not in for the fight. And so I hired a guy to run my business for me while I took time off to care for my family. And sadly, he demolished the company over the 2.5 years that I had to step away. And when my mom had been buried and my daughter had been, feeling much better and sort of equalized, I had to look at the books and went, you've almost bankrupted my company. How did you do that? And I had to fire everybody in the company. I mean, every single person, Jeff. And I had to look at what was left in the shell. And I had $250,000 that had been given to us by clients. So their programs were halfway done. And I hadn't worked in the business for 3 years. So I didn't know actually where we were and how to run a program anymore, because obviously an agency evolves through the years. But I frickin' did it. I went to a couple of people who worked with me prior to the guy working with me. And I went to another agency who I asked to white label with me. And we completed all of the programs. Clients were all happy. Nobody on the outside could tell that anything had broken. And I rebuilt the company, definitely not to its former glory, but it started to become profitable again. And I sold it to the owners of Toys R Us Canada because I knew I was done. I was tired of being an entrepreneur. And I was also not in the mom space in the same way, because at that point, my kids were, I think, 18 and 20. So motherhood and new motherhood was not my passion anymore. So I sold the company, but ironically, I'm still running it for them. I do it on a part-time basis. I collaborate with the teams at Toys R Us to extend the reach a little bit. But I'm also expanding my horizons in other ways because it doesn't fill me up the same way it used to. So how did I know it was time to quit? It wasn't financially viable. And it also didn't light me up emotionally in terms of my life stage.
Yeah. Erica, would it be fair to say that you don't spend a lot of time crying over spilled milk?
I think that's fair to say. You don't have time. I don't have time. I have to pay my bills. And I also want to live life. And I believe that there are opportunities around every corner. Every person I meet, I can see, whoa, maybe I can work with Jeff. Maybe we can come up with something new and exciting. I mean, that's the way I think. And there is this weird connotation of the word opportunist, which I absolutely am. which is someone who takes advantage of people to get ahead. But with me, it's the opposite. For me, it's finding mutually beneficial opportunities where we both benefit. It's like 1 + 1 = 6. Let's do it. So find people who are like-minded, who also believe in the possibilities, who see possibilities, who are smart risk takers, and go do something exciting. Even though it's not going to maybe make you money right away, you'll be lit up. You'll have purpose.
Yeah, well, and you say opportunist, and I think that, yeah, you're right. It does have a negative connotation. But what you do is you see opportunities. I mean, you're such an optimist, it sounds like to me. Do you consider yourself an optimist? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah.
I get excited every day to see what's going to happen today. And I guess I'm almost like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. If I really want to be airy-fairy about it, I feel like the world is a beautiful place if you look in the right places. And there are so many incredible people to build a life and a career and friendships with. It's endless. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Now, one of those opportunities that's more recent for you is you're doing a lot of public speaking about what you've learned about innovation from your time at Much. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about what some of the key elements of innovation that you took from your time there are, and how companies maybe can start thinking about some of those things.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I mean, speaking in front of an audience has been something that I've been doing, since the mid 80s. My ability to go in front of an audience and entertain, but connect with each person there and to blow their mind, to exceed their expectations, that's always exciting. I remember I spoke to, it was a group of pool owners or swim school owners. And the response, the feedback after was, this was way better than I thought it would be. At the end, people always give their feedback because they thought I would, talk about, MuchMusic or something weird like that. But really, I'm lit up by innovation and leadership and the connection between the two. And it never ceases to amaze me how leaders kill the spirit, kill the creativity of their employees. I think Joanna, I forget her last name, who built the company Nix, to me is an example of someone who is doing it all right. And she's reaping the benefits. She sold her business a few years ago for like $8 billion. I'm not exaggerating, like literally billions of dollars. And it's a woman's lingerie company. I mean, brilliant. So there's a few things that I think people who lead organizations or companies can sort of invest in their company that actually doesn't cost a lot of money. Invest in a culture of innovation and creativity. Find ways to inspire, require your team to come up with novel ideas. And then within those ideas that are presented, actually do some of them. So don't just brainstorm them, show some of them in action. And there is something called micro innovation. So it's not like you completely change direction, but if you do one small thing, it's like changing a recipe. If you change one ingredient in a recipe, you're going to get a different end result. So in companies, take small risks and make those changes come from your staff, because your staff and your clients and your customers are your best critics, because they know the internal workings, they know the stoppages. Your customers know what they don't like. They know what they like. So if you can listen, and I think MuchMusic did that really well back in the day, is that we respected our audience. Our audience was everything. most broadcasters like CTV, I don't think respects their audience. They are that old-fashioned autocratic, it's our way, and we will decide what you will like. You will listen to us. MuchMusic and City TV was, we are you. Come in, walk in through our window, be a part of the conversation. I mean, even the idea of Speaker's Corner, which they literally built shows of people sharing their point of view. So to create an organization and a culture of communication between the top and the bottom, that's essential now. I mean, there's a book that I love that was written by Rose Patton. She is at Rotman Business School. She wrote a book called Intentional Leadership. And she talks about the 8 different qualities that leaders today need to have as compared to the old-fashioned, old white-haired man running the company, the authoritative dictatorship. That doesn't work, and that doesn't inspire creativity. So MuchMusic, our boss, Moses, he said to us, go and come up with an idea and then do it. He entrusted us with the vision of his company. He encouraged creativity. And when something didn't work, we just stopped doing it. It was brilliant being there.
Yeah, so the stop doing it piece, like I get everything you're saying and I'm on board with it. And I think when people start to do it, their reaction to failure is so much different than they wish it was. And so how did you ensure that a mistake wasn't going to be catastrophic?
Well, that's where the micro innovations come in. You don't invest your whole budget in one idea. You tiptoe, you do tests, you send out surveys to your either staff or to your customers and see how things are landing. Because I think if you don't do it, you're going to make assumptions. Here's an example of the assumptions that we make. Carolyn Ray owns a company called Journeywoman. It is a online community for women who travel solo. And over COVID, you can imagine, she was fucked. She was fucked. She had just bought the business and the entire travel industry had ended. And so she was trying to come up with ways to monetize her business so that she didn't go under while everyone stopped traveling. And so she came up with a way of sort of bringing some money in. She wanted to build a subscription where she would create content and opportunities that were sort of behind a paywall. And so she announced it to her readership, which is like 60,000, 80,000 women. And the response was quite low. And she was really freaked out and devastated. And she went, oh my God, no one is going to pay. They're used to not paying for content. So she sent out a second survey and she asked the same women, why, for those of you who have chosen not to become a member, tell me why. You're not going to believe what they told her. We want more. You're not charging enough. Please give us A, B, C, and D, and we will pay more to be a member. Okay? So that to me was a great example of she took a little risk to charge for something. She then didn't assume that she understood why the consumer was responding in a certain way. And so she adjusted and added some things in and charged more and learned more about her end user.
Yeah, and there's a key there. I mean, there's a lot that you said there, but one of the keys is we very seldom ask our non-customers for insight. Usually our insights are coming from the people that do pay us. And I think often that kind of veers us towards the status quo as opposed to the opposite. So that's brilliant. She also asked a really good question, but that's amazing. So for all, and Erica, are there other sort of innovation lessons that you want to share from Much?
Sure.
What are some other ones that maybe stood out?
I think what my boss did to me, or bosses did to me, which was tell me that I was replaceable, was a great example of what not to do with your employees. There needs to be transparency, communication, empathy. These are all skills that Rose Patton now speaks about. So the ideas that I had thought about back in the day, like why are my bosses not more forthcoming with me? So there's two sides to MuchMusic at the time. There was the corporate side, and then there was the programming side. The programming side was unbelievable. The corporate side needed a little work. And that's because it was in the 90s. It was still in the, let's call it the dark ages of managing people. Although Bell continues that same sort of not transparent, very top-down connection with their staff. They live in constant fear. You know, they're so hated because they have this Bell Let's Talk campaign, and then their actions are the exact opposite. Like, this is a company that really is, it's imploding. And a lot of it is because of the way that they are treating their staff. Like, everybody is withered from the inside, and no one wants to innovate because they don't want to give them their IP, because they know that their time there is probably short. So the opposite is work with your staff and give them constant insight into the state of the business, and include them in not necessarily the business decisions at the end, but certainly to feel a part of a team of people. To me, it's a no-brainer. I know that it's uncomfortable because those who were in power before had a different workforce. But social media has changed the game, where we all have a voice and we all can rally together and, fight the man. Unfortunately, power is different now. Power is often in the hands of the employees. So respect them and treat them differently.
Yeah, no, good advice. And I think people would be curious too. Like, people always want to know, what was it like to work with like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos? How do they show up in the hallways of the office? And Moses Namer was just such a media mogul. What was it like what would an interaction with him look like on a regular basis, that he was able to create that kind of maybe safety to take chances and risks? I would just be so fascinated to hear a bit about that.
I think it was mostly his hands off. And the fact that he was hands off told us that, just do it. Just do it. You're free. And if something didn't work, you didn't get in trouble. It just got pulled. Right? Like, you didn't get fired for doing something that wasn't sustainable in some way, because he looked for people who were daring. He looked for people who were bold. And again, those people are the ones who will take chances or push your company forward a little bit, because what's that saying? Change has never happened this fast before, and it will never be this slow again. Meaning, if your company isn't constantly evolving, changing, growing, listening to the world outside, it will die.
Yeah. So as innovative as they were, they sort of fell into irrelevance, right? I mean, if you put
they were not innovative, because Moses sold the business to Bell, and Bell began imposing their traditional broadcasting values, or lack thereof, onto MuchMusic. They changed, for example, the people they hired went from, shit disturbers like me and all the earlier people to more sort of celebrity focused, attractive, charming hosts, perhaps with less personality. I don't want to demean anybody, but it was a different type of person that they were looking for. Suddenly those people had to follow scripts. They were on camera less. And the programming very slowly started to veer away from authentic conversations about music and culture. And they started to play all these reality shows and American programming. And it really, it brought irrelevance onto themselves rather than fight it out and come up with ways to embrace new technologies like YouTube, which started to steal away the eyeballs from many people. Instead, they just pretended as if that didn't matter. And they stopped innovating. And that was what sent them into this spiral of, unimportance. They lost this beautiful opportunity, which we had back in the day, which was being a voice, a united voice of culture that brought Canadians together. They blew that up.
And it's an almost predictable cycle. Like there's a life cycle model we use with our clients, and it's not based on how long a business has been around, but businesses are either youthful or they're aged, and they usually go from youthful to aging when they bring in too many administrators and too many bureaucrats. And it sounds exactly, at least in part, what happened there. Erica,
and also their purpose. MuchMusic had a purpose. Moses had a purpose. He wanted to build a culture. He still is obsessed with culture and community. And Bell, their purpose is to make money for their shareholders. That never ends well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You also mentioned this intersection between leadership and innovation. And do you have any perspective on maybe what's missing from leadership today?
Yes, there's a quote. This is from Rose Patton that I love. The mark of a good leader is not what they've personally achieved, but how they've led people who can achieve and be their best. And I think in many cases, particularly politics, we are saddled with, but when I say saddled, often they're chosen, but let's just say saddled with leaders whose personal gains are more important than the people who they lead. So ultimately, a great leader is someone who can get down on the level of their staff, inspire, motivate, teach, engage, challenge them to be great. And if your team is great, you know that everybody, the whole business will rise. But that takes a different kind of investment and a different type of, let's call it, humility that I think a lot of leaders might lack.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think one of the things that happens is people acquire power through the ways that we measure success. And so that becomes the lens with which we look at leadership is their own personal achievements, which give them power and influence, which usually causes corruption, even naturally. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. But I also think there's a lot of leaders that they reach their status and their power because of their personal achievements. But I think it's difficult even for humble leaders to make that transition to realizing it's not about how I got here. It's about how do I create an environment for others to find their unique path to get where they need to go. And I don't think that comes naturally, Erica.
I also think that it's very hard to articulate, like in your resume or CV or when you're in a meeting. People are looking for those external successes, the personal successes. What awards have you won? You know, all those kinds of personal achievements to choose people to be the leaders rather than talking to the people who used to work for them or work with them and ask them, what are they like as a person? Do they collaborate? Do they know how to bring people together? Do they know how to solve problems collaboratively? Do they inspire innovation? It's not about the awards they've won, and it doesn't matter how pretty they are, like how glossy they are, what kind of a persona, a public persona they have, what kind of celebrity they bring. That is not going to inspire a company to greatness. When I say quiet leader, they're not necessarily quiet, but they're not bombastic. They're in. They get in with everybody, and they're part of a team of people, and they lead by getting under everyone and pushing everybody forward. That's a servant leader. Do you know what I mean? It's a different kind. And also we need people who are visionary. We need people who are willing to take risks, not big risks, calculated risks, based on learning from their staff, their customers, the end users, people who are comfortable not always knowing the answer, but being open to learning the answer from other people. That's humility again. You can't always know the right thing to do. You have to be like you, Jeff. You have an ability to listen and synthesize information and say, wow, that person has a really good idea. I'm going to put my idea aside because that idea may be more useful in the situation that we're in. So there's a fluidity there. You have to be humble. Those are qualities actually not usually associated with older men. Sorry. Younger men, yes, who are like you are taught, like you're laughing, you're biting your tongue, but it's a fact is that there was a patriarchal shape to companies where there was someone on top and it's my way. And yes, there's a huge responsibility on that person, but perhaps they didn't listen. Perhaps they might not have been the best listeners over the years, and their arrogance would show up as you can see in the music business, by the way. The arrogance, no one will ever take over our music business. No one can compete with us who own the record labels and we know everything. Well, not really. There was a whole different way, and many young upstarts had approached record labels and said, hey, we have this new streaming platform that we would like to bring to you. But their arrogance and fear, because they didn't understand it and didn't want to admit that they didn't understand it, made them lose their businesses, made the industry a shadow of its former self.
Yeah. There's something else that's coming up for me here in terms of, so you mentioned risk taking, and we need leaders that are willing to take risks and be visionary. And on the one hand, it is easier for the individual to grow an audience today. But then on the other hand, it's also easier for us to be, our failures and our mistakes to be exposed to a large audience. And I wonder if somehow there's like a paradoxical relationship with risk taking in there. But do you think it's getting easier or harder for people to take risks?
What is wrong with failure? Sorry, when your quotation marks failures are exposed, if you're transparent about it, it's not a big deal, because you can also reframe it as, we just learned a great lesson. This doesn't work, but we're taking risks because we believe that our company has to evolve. And we want you along with us for the ride. Give us your feedback. There is no shame in failure. There's shame in not acknowledging that you're learning from the failure.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense, but I think it's hard because we naturally overestimate how much other people care about what we're doing, right? We know that the average person is so invested in their own their own ideas,
I
their own
totally
life.
disagree.
Tell me
Nobody
more.
gives a shit about what you're doing.
That's what I mean. No, that's what I mean. We make the mistake of thinking that people are going to care, but they don't. Yeah, I was like, oh, tell me more about that, Erica. Yeah, I disagree.
No, nobody cares about you.
Yeah, but I think
everybody cares about themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think it takes work for people to understand and realize that. So I think it's brilliant that you're talking about failure in the way that you are, because I think more of a spotlight needs to be shone on that by people that have been successful to say, hey, look, I make mistakes every day. So I think what you're doing is really important. And
but of course we do. Everybody does. People make mistakes. How else do we learn? I mean, you have to know what not to do in order to go, oh, if that road doesn't work, then we're going to have to turn this way, which means let's come up with a plan for turning left instead of right. That seems obvious. There's nothing shameful about it. It's like, I don't know. It sets me off.
Try telling that to a perfectionist, though, right? I mean, I encounter all kinds of, just like you. I mean, all kinds of personalities. I know lots of people that they don't even start something because they can't stand the thought of being a beginner or having fresh eyes, like you said, and it just prevents them from experiencing so much joy and progress. So, anyways, that's a whole other thread. Now, I want to talk about resistance a little bit. So, you have said that you've encountered resistance in your career, of course. And what kind of messages would you have for people that might be experiencing their own form of resistance right now?
Well, that's external. So you can't control other people. You just have to, put on your helmet and your football war paint and just pummel ahead. Like, you cannot control other people. The only one that you can control is yourself. So do what you love, work hard, be persistent. When you hear no, learn from it. Oh, that's actually an interesting thing. When you get resistance from someone or something, there's a great opportunity there, again. Because if you tell me no, I have the opportunity to say, cool, can you tell me why? Do you not like the product? Which is fine. I need to learn from you. Would you mind just giving me a little bit of insight? Or, cool, would you be okay if I reached out again in 3 months? I'm going to massage this a bit and reach out. Or, cool, I know that your company is kind of struggling financially now. Would it be okay if I reached out in a few more months? It's about building relationships. So when someone says no to you, it doesn't mean, no, I never want to speak to you again. It means it is not the right time for me or the right thing for me at this time. They're not saying, never talk to me again. And for me, I have the most incredible network of people who have said no to me that I constantly communicate with, because sometimes they're going to say, you know what? I actually have time now to do that. Or, you know what? Thanks for reaching out, because something just crossed my desk that I think you might actually enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that. It's not uncommon that I'll get referred to a new client by someone that has never been one and probably never will. But you maintain that respectful relationship, and where you can't be all things to all people, and it doesn't mean you can't still have a relationship, though. Now, what about for the people, like the leaders that you've encountered along the way that put up unfair obstacles and resistance in your way? I wonder if you've got any sort of advice or tips for people that are in power on ways that they can maybe be more aware of resistance, unnecessary resistance that they might be putting in the way of others from achieving their greatness.
Well, it's basically everything that I've been raving about or ranting about for the last hour. And also maybe pick up that book by Rose Patton, Intentional Leadership, and be open. There's also another book called Ego is the Enemy that you might want to pick up. These are important books that may hurt. They could, you could get a few little twinges of discomfort while reading it. But if you don't change with the times, you will become irrelevant, like MuchMusic.
Yeah. Eric, of all the things that you've done, like, you're always pushing forward. You're such a driver with that laser focus. Do you give yourself permission to reflect and think about all of your achievements?
I guess so. That's why I'm able to have these types of conversations. I like to learn and I like to synthesize ideas. So, for example, when I do that keynote about MuchMusic, it's really going back now, 30 odd years later, and going, oh, that's why I do that. That's why, for example, that's why community is so important to me. Like building community. That's why when I built YMC, that's why it came so naturally to me. It's because it was drilled into me when I was a kid working at MuchMusic that your community is everything. You respect your community more than anybody else. Our community was more important to us than the rock stars that came in. And by the way, if you watch the new MuchMusic documentary, whenever it hopefully will air, you will see that there is just as much respect shown to the audience that there is to the stars, because Moses already understood this shift. Perhaps he even led this shift from being like a push medium to a democratic one, where the end user is as important as the celebrities. He kind of rebalanced that dynamic, which to me is really what's happened in social media. And Moses and we did that first.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's been a walk down memory lane, speaker's corner, and going outside on the street corner, even just imagining and visualizing the people looking through the windows while you're hosting. Like I can feel what that used to be like to watch. Right. And I don't think I realized at the time how much of a gravitational pull that was to keep tuning in, because you're right. The best part of the show was not the music videos. It was everything that happened in between. That's why we tuned in, right? And there was a lot more at play there than I think I ever realized. And you've given me a deeper appreciation of that, Erica. I've had management thinker Tom Peters on the program before, and he talks a lot about leaders would be wise to stop thinking less about resume values and virtues and think more about eulogy virtues and values. And I wonder, so when you think about your own legacy and your own eulogy virtues, what would they be? What's important to you? How do you want Erica M to be remembered?
Oh, I love that question. I made the world a better place. I walk the talk, and I blaze a trail for other people to walk safely behind me.
And I imagine that you have done that for countless people. And is there a story of impact that you've heard from somebody that stands out to you?
So there's two different worlds. There's the YMC world, where I had so many women who were at home with their kids and were kind of struggling with what to do next. They became part of my team, and they reinvented their careers by working with me and for me. And it's very exciting to watch their careers today. And they always pipe in and they thank me, and it feels great. We're all friends. We built a community that was not just this fake digital play. It was a real community where we all supported each other and still do. So there's that side of it. And what has really hit my heart is in mid last year, I went across the country and was part of screenings for the MuchMusic documentary. And every screening had a Q&A after. And there were so many women who lined up to make a comment or ask a question about being a woman in the media. Many of them saying that I inspired them to use their voice more. Some of them looked for jobs in the media. And a lot of women said, because I saw you doing it, I felt I could too. So that's what I talk about, blazing the trail for other women. I took the heat, and I'm so happy that I've inspired so many women to pursue their own dreams in having a voice in the media or running businesses. That's what it's about. And by the way, to go full circle, that's what Amber Mack does as well.
Yeah, well said. Erica, this has been such a treat. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today and sharing a little bit about yourself, your experiences, what you're working on next as well. Just so many inspirational nuggets and pearls of wisdom here. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Great questions. And you listen so well. It inspires us to talk more.
Well, thank you, Erica. That really does mean a lot to me, and especially coming from you, who is a master at this craft. Where can people find you?
Well, sadly, I'm on every frickin' social media platform. LinkedIn is always good. Instagram, I guess, are the two. I'm on Twitter. I won't change it to X, it's Twitter. But it's kind of hard to have conversations there because trolls come in and interrupt the conversations.
Yeah, I'm with you. I still call it Twitter as well. I just have this like faith, this probably dream world belief it'll be returned to its former glory, but I think that's not very probable. So, but anyway, Erica, this has been such a treat. Until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us, and go and be more like Erica. Keep creating and put on your battle gear, your football gear, and break down your own barriers. Thanks everybody for joining us.
And be kind. Be kind.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever your favorite podcasts are found. And if you're part of a leadership team and you just know that your organization is capable of even better performance, please reach out to us at unleashresults.com for a conversation and to learn more about how we might help unleash the potential of your team and organization.